Yes.
Have you ever had your hives attacked by Yellowjacket?
We have quite a few Yellowjackets where I am, so that's a pretty much constant thing, especially toward the late summer when they make the shift from foraging to scavenging. Yeah.
You do anything?
I don't do a whole lot. I'll go on field trips and try to find nests and destroy them. I mean, I don't really do much other than that. Probably robbing is more of a problem on the late summer front. But yeah, there are Yellowjackets around. Yeah. Anybody else? All right, well, let me get this set up real quick. If you have any more questions before we're done. So this is a talk I call Hostile Questions. Or what to do when someone calls you names. Now, the point of this is, as many of you know, the beekeeping world is not particularly friendly to the treatment-free movement quite yet. It was different back when it was something that was fringe and that was never going to work, so don't worry about it. But now, if you actually look at the numbers, there are many, many treatment-free beekeepers around if you look at the Bee Informed National Survey. By the way, if you are a beekeeper of any stripe, take the Bee Informed National Survey every year. They do it in March, I think. You can get signed up on their website, and once you're signed up, they'll send you a reminder email every year. And so those graphs that I showed you earlier, those are from the Bee Informed Survey. It gives you information on not only just what treatments work and don't work, but other things like drone brood removal and screen bottom boards, and hopefully they'll do one for poly hives and things like that. What's that? BEE Informed National Survey. I don't remember their website right offhand, but it's really easy to find. And they've put in a new little app on their website, so you can do check boxes. You can check all the information from your state, other states, all the states. You can separate it out by type of beekeeper and that sort of thing. So really good information. It'd be good to have the most data points in that we can, so we can all learn from it. All right, so arguing with people. Right now it's not super hostile, but I also kind of wall myself off from the hostility a lot. Bruce has told me some interesting stories about stuff he's come across online about people who really hate me and stuff like that, and I really don't care that much. I used to care more, but I had to decide not to care because it was taking up too much of my time and too much of my mental space. I realized that you can't argue someone into your point of view. I mean, how often do you get someone into your point of view by them losing an argument? It just doesn't work very well. So, number one is pointless, and number two, the best way to prove your point is just by continuing to do what you're doing. Eventually, they'll have to give up the argument that you're just lying, because it takes a lot of energy to keep up a lie for 15 years, especially one this elaborate. You know what I'm saying? You know, I got a website and a big Facebook group and a blog and all this. You know, so I've been making up a lot of statistics over the years about how many hives I have and how many I've lost. I'm told. And the other thing that's really important is civility. Again, you're never going to convince someone to bring someone over to your side by calling them names, calling them stupid, calling them ignorant, or telling them that they're smoking something, or whatever. It's not going to help. So just don't do it. And know your audience, because if you're telling someone something that doesn't mean anything to them, it's not going to stick. So if you know the people you're talking to, you can tailor what you're saying to them. Right? So this this audience is pretty friendly to me. They, you know, it's an event that I'm headlining, so they came here to see me, so that's great. But I've done beekeeping conferences where I'm like the token treatment-free beekeeper and everybody else isn't. So that's a bit more hostile. So, you know, think about that.
Say, Solomon, one thing that's, I don't know if it's science per se, but it's understood that brain centers where your point of view resides are the same brain centers where your identity resides.
Yes.
And so when someone's point of view is challenged, it's the same as challenging their identity.
Yes.
And so that's why you can never win an argument.
And that's why it's always, someone will always forgive you for being wrong, but they won't forgive you for being right. You see what I mean? They'll forgive you for being wrong, but they don't want to forgive, they don't want you to know that you were right. You see what I'm saying? I can't say that. So, mite bombs. This is the one you're probably going to come into most often. And I've got a couple of things a couple of responses to this that I've come up with. And my point of view has varied over the last couple of years about the problem of mite bombs, because I don't have big problems with mites anymore. It's just not a thing that I have. My main problem year-round to deal with is wax moths, because that's when I don't have enough hives to keep my comb maintained by the bees. I don't have any way of because I'm a treatment-free beekeeper, I don't have any way of protecting it. So wax moths are my problem. So here's a couple points I have. Established treatment hives, treatment-free hives rarely have mite problems. That's my situation. So a lot of people would say, okay, that's fine. What about new beekeepers? So other problems, hives that crash in winter don't get robbed. This is, most hives in my world seem to crash during winter when nobody's flying. So the mites are going to die with the bees. So that's not causing a mite bomb. I think the greatest source of mite bombs does everybody know what a mite bomb is, first of all?
Not really, you throw down mass.
Yeah, so the idea behind a mite bomb is that mites will overtake a hive. The hive will be dying and crashing. Other bees from surrounding come in to rob out that hive as it's dying and crashing. They take the mites home with them. That's the idea of the mite bomb. But so where are those mite bombs coming from? I would contend that with the sheer number of swarms that are being produced by unresistant treated hives that end up in trees and buildings, those are the real source of mite bombs. Swarms coming from my hives don't have mite problems. My hives don't have mite problems. And even the average new beekeeper doesn't have that many hives. It's not a big thing. Still, the majority in most areas of beekeepers are treating beekeepers, and they're losing their swarms, and many of those swarms are not caught. And that's where, if there's a major problem, that's where mites are coming from. No matter what you do, you're never going to be able to treat the feral hives. Say you come to the solution, we've got to treat all the hives to stop the mite bombs from happening. You're still going to be missing, numbers vary, somewhere in the area of half of all the hives in the country are feral. You can't treat those, so that's not a solution for that either. Treated bees still often become mite bombs anyway. Treatments aren't 100% effective. Treated hives still die of mites. So that's another source of mite bombs that we can't really control, even if we do what they say we're supposed to do. And the other thing is, my hives and other treatment-free beekeepers who are at their sustainable phase are actually absorbing mites from the environment. That your hives are going to rob other hives, and they're coming back with mites, and they're still doing okay because they're dealing with those mites that they bring back. That's what we call a mite black hole. Again, that wasn't my idea. That was John Keefus's idea. So we're actually instead of contributing to the problem, we're actually helping the problem. Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that little phrase where you said that your bees are dealing with? How do they deal with them? Like, that would be different than maybe what my bees would do.
So that depends on your specific bees, because if you're in a sustainable treatment-free operation, your bees have figured out some mix of traits that allows them to survive the mites.
Such as, like,
Such as-
biting.
All of that. Hygienic behavior, suppressed mite reproduction, all of that. Whatever is happening there, we don't know exactly. They're handling the problem.
Okay.
So when they bring mites home, because all hives rob from each other and all hives get robbed from, and it just happens all the time. Your hives are dealing with it because obviously they're not crashing. So we call that mite black holes. Yeah.
If I'm talking to somebody and they say they don't have a problem with mice, and then I ask them how they know that, and if they check and they say no, what do I say then? Like, how come you know your bees are are dealing with mice fine
Right,
if
because
you're
they don't
not
see any, right?
checking?
You ever hear that one?
Yeah, I'm not trying to be rude or anything.
No, that's fine.
But like I like to do a sugar roll or alcohol wash just to have data,
Mhm.
you know? So what about the people, the treatment-free people that don't take data? How do we know for sure?
It depends on the person. Excuse me. So in the case of a newbie, I don't like the term newbie. In the case of a freshman beekeeper, if they're not checking, they don't know. They don't know that they have good bees. They don't know anything. So in that case, be highly skeptical. In my case, where I've been keeping bees for 15 years, I have an established yearly loss rate. I know what I'm looking for when I do an autopsy on a hive. I can tell what it died from.
Right.
I can be fairly reliable in telling you that my bees don't have problems with mites.
Yeah, and you would be, and someone with more experience that is also treatment-free would have a better eye for mite transfer diseases.
Right, mite-related diseases,
Swine
yeah. Israeli paralysis virus and
Right.
all the rest.
Okay.
Yeah, good point. Don't trust anybody. No. Don't trust everybody. Trust some people. Yeah.
Is there data about feral hives and how they're responding, and are they finding them to be stronger?
There-
Resistance?
There is some. I can't recall right offhand anything that would directly.
Somebody in Pennsylvania studying that at
Yeah.
state.
Yeah, it's Dr. Uribe.
Yeah, right, but I didn't go to that talk.
I was telling a couple people, I think, about that. If you guys do know of any feral colonies, like I have one in mind I'm hoping to get access to next spring. She likes to come out and just take a sample of like 20, 30, 50 bees and take them back to the lab to analyze their disease. She's not necessarily doing mite counts, but she wants to study disease in feral colonies. And if you know of that, you contact her and hopefully she can get together with you and take that sample. And she has a chart and a map and all that kind of stuff. But that's something she is studying. Maybe not so much from a mite resistance aspect, but more so the diseases in wild bees. So if you guys ever become privy to information of like the one I know about is a house that's had bees in the attic kind of eave area for decades, I'm told. So I'm sure she would like to get a little sample of that just for her study. So there are people that do that and track.
And there.
Her full name's kind of long. Her last name's Uribe.
Margarita Lopez.
There you go.
And I saw some of that information. I don't know if it's from the same study, but last week in Alaska, Tracy Smith was talking about some of that data and how they were finding. And I think her data came from Canada, but just how present those viruses are in the bee population. How many, like certain viruses, like 100% of the hives surveyed had that virus in it, but most of those hives weren't suffering from effects of it. It's the same as American foul brood. Virtually every hive has American foul brood spores in it. It's just a question of whether it has reached an infectious level. So one of the questions I get asked is, why not treat and then requeen? A couple reasons. I think this is an American way of looking at it, throwing money at the problem. I again, don't want to bring bees from the outside. They're poorly acclimated. I talked about hybrid nastiness. When you cross your bees with, bring new bees with local bees, you can cause them to be mean. And you don't know until you try. If you let a hive go, see what happens. You don't know what's going to happen until you do it. Also, when you requeen arbitrarily, you reduce genetic variability. That's why I try not to do anything arbitrarily, especially when it involves killing something, because whatever that had is lost now, and it might have been. Chances are 99 out of 100, 900 out of, however many out of. Chances are it's not going to cause a problem, but there might have been something there that I would have liked, and so I want to see what will happen. That's a personal preference thing. Also, I don't want to contaminate my hive, and I don't want to get into that mindset where I'm trying to help. One of the ones that I hear is that hives are unnatural and we're just treating to compensate. I've tried to explain this in so many different ways, is bees are not really domesticated like animals are. They live in our hives until they don't want to. They will leave if they want to. Treated bees still die. We talked about this earlier. Doesn't solve any problems. You're just... And if your hive is so bad that you're causing problems with survival with the colony inside, I think that's probably your fault. I don't think that's something that should be fixed by treating. It should be fixed by building a better hive and being a better beekeeper. Soft treatments. There's a spelling mistake. I just don't want to read this to you guys. So I'm just going to ignore reading this. I'm just going to talk about stuff. You can read. I'll give you an off-the-cuff answer. Why not soft treatments? My big focus on why not soft treatments is because, again, it doesn't solve anything. We're going back to the trying to help solution, trying to throw money at the thing solution, when we're asking the wrong question. We're getting the wrong answer. You're in a helicopter. That's not helpful. What's the real problem? The real problem is that the bees are not getting the opportunity to adapt to the diseases themselves, like they should, like they would, like they do in trees. That's what we're trying to get. I like to be interactive with the feral population. The bees living in the trees should be basically the same bees that are living in my hive. I'm going to lose swarms to them. They're going to get swarms. I'm going to get swarms from them. If we're going back and forth, then there's nothing that's going to be benefiting me by doing something differently in my hive, other than maybe making the hive. One of the reasons why we're able to harvest so much honey is that we make bigger hives. The bees have to fill that space. They don't have the space in the tree. They fill the tree, they swarm, they reproduce. We're kind of reusing the swarming impetus to make honey rather than making more bees.
On that, I want to clarify language in terms, make sure I understand
Sure.
appropriately, because it gets bandied about at local conference, and it's even on this card here.
Mm-hmm.
Natural means organic or soft treatments, right? Current beekeeping can be treatment-free, but it can also be soft treatments and organic. Is that correct? When someone says natural beekeeping?
There are different points of view on that. My supposition is that there's no such thing as natural beekeeping.
True, but the term is used.
Yeah.
And
So
it's
natural.
used in conferences and other things like that.
See, and it's such a fungible term. It used to be that organic was a real thing, and organic became a legal thing. It used to be you could just call things organic, and there was this undercurrent in the culture that said that this is organic. But then when it became a legal thing, all these products pop up which are in no way within the framework of what used to be considered organic. You can buy a feed additive to make chickens' egg yolks more yellow, and it's technically considered organic, but it's not within the...
I'm in the field, I get all that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand specifically for beekeeping right now, the language.
Typically, chemical-free means using some sort of either organic acid or essential oil. Natural just means whatever anybody wants to use it for.
And I understand what that means in food and other stuff too, but I see the card over here, it says natural beekeeping. I've gone on sites that say natural beekeeping, and in the beginning people led me to think it's treatment-free, but as soon as I read it, I see they're talking about oxalic acid. So, you know, treatment-free is treatment-free.
In my world here,
Discussions on that.
yeah.
I read your blog, I know there's discussions on that, so I'm just trying to get...
And that's why I use the term treatment-free.
Clarity.
Yeah, that's why I use the term treatment-free, because there's just nothing that I do here that involves trying to help the bees survive when they should be surviving on their own. The way they use natural, like people will use natural cell when what they mean is foundationless. Natural cell is what bees do in trees. That's natural. There's no movable frames. Everything that we do and put in the hive and the way that we manage makes it unnatural. So that's why I don't use the term natural. I use more natural. Like, this is more natural than that, but it's not natural. I'm still getting in there and messing things around.
I know. In part of my other field, I know natural means it's simply made from plants or animals, but it's still made from something. It's not in its natural, its nature environment.
Right.
So I understand the manipulation of the terms.
Yeah.
I was just trying to see.
It's frustrating to me. It really is.
Frustrating to me.
Well, it's like oxalic acid. It's natural because it occurs in rhubarb or whatever.
Yeah, but I don't have to wear gloves and a mask when I eat rhubarb.
It's exactly the point. If you huff rhubarb, you're not going to die. If you huff oxalic acid, you're not going to have a good time.
We were having this discussion earlier, the distinction between soft formic acid in the manner that you just said,
Right.
and taking rhubarb leaves and crushing them in the hive and let them release formic naturally. That's natural.
Right, or the bees foraging off of my thyme as opposed to using the thymol oil. So.
But I've never seen rhubarb fall into a hive and decay to the point where it releases. So it's still a management practice.
I think that's where the big argument comes up in the beekeeping world, because when you say I'm treatment-free or I'm this, you know, and you know, at one group, one beekeeper would say, well, if you split your hive without letting it swarm on its own, then you treated your hive because you intentionally broke the brood pattern. And I think where most people who say, well, I'm a natural beekeeper, what they're saying is I'm a chemical-free beekeeper. Mm-hmm. I can split my hive, I can re-clean, I can do whatever I need to do to break patterns, to reduce or increase populations and stuff, because it's going to benefit the bees. And so that's, you know, it's, I think the big argument in the beekeeping world is I'm either going to introduce chemicals, whether a harsh chemical or a light chemical, or I'm not going to use a chemical, and everyone's interchanging these terms, and I'm this, but in all actuality, you're really not, because you're doing something. And I think that's where the clarification needs to be.
You're still creating dependency.
Yeah, exactly, because, you know, here, I think in the state of Pennsylvania, if you're an organic farmer, one of the laws under being organic is you cannot allow the animal to die while it's in your care. Well, because honeybees are considered livestock in Pennsylvania, if you know that your bees have mite and you know they're crashing and you can do something, whether it's treating them and you don't, then you just broke the rule of being an organic beekeeper.
Well, it's even
That's a
tougher in
stupid one.
Pennsylvania to have organic honey. You have to have a certain radius, I believe
Sure.
it's 3 miles of no pesticides,
Yeah.
no
Yeah, good luck
pesticides
with
at
that.
all. So there is
Yeah.
nowhere in Pennsylvania that you can actually produce true organic honey.
Yeah.
So Jason Braun's website is Let Him Be.
Yeah,
And his goal is, he puts them out in the field, and they either make it or they don't. And he's on the quest, as Parker said, to find bees that will just survive. Let them be. He doesn't even want to open his hives. So,
he's almost to the, and I'm not saying this like pejoratively, like he's almost to the point where he's a swarm catcher, not a beekeeper.
yeah. And his hives sit out in the field and do whatever they're going to do. And he is the, well, I don't want to put words in his mouth on his practice, but he is the epitome of they either make it or they don't. He's not
Yeah.
doing anything.
Is he harvest them?
I should put that there.
Well, and that's what I've been accused of over the years. It's like, you're doing brood breaks, you're doing this, and you're doing small cell, and you're doing all of that that's helping your bees survive. And I'm going, but I don't do that. I don't do brood breaks in my hive. The hive, if you take a hive and split it 2 ways, only half the hive gets a brood break. This one's still fine. This one's still normal. So that's how my bees got developed. There was no brood breaks. And when I even with screen bottom boards, when they were originally introduced, they were sold as the mites fall through the bottom, and so that reduces your mite load. So that's not been proven out, but I eventually got rid of my screen bottom boards because I didn't want to help the bees. I wanted them to deal with that, and trees don't have screen bottom boards.
Yeah, but isn't it true that when you split that in half, then you're leaving probably 50% of your mites behind? And then depending on which frames you choose, if you're moving that existing queen into a hive that has little to no larva, chances of them having mites, because then they won't go in and the cell has just eggs. So at that point, you have, in essence, have left the mite behind and have started all over with basically a fairly clean hive.
Mhm.
And at that point, you have increased her chances of survival because you've got a whole lot less mites to deal with naturally.
Maybe, sure. I'll even give it to you, but so many of my hives over the years haven't been split.
Yeah.
You know, there were years when they didn't get touched at all. And so whatever you think that I'm doing that caused them to survive hasn't been done
No, I'm not saying
a lot of the
bad.
time. No, I'm not talking about you,
Yeah,
I'm just
no,
saying.
I'm saying in general, but
I've been accused of all sorts of these things, so it's, you know, I just keep doing it and
it's working.
it's working.
Do you have a stat? I'm sorry.
Do you, do the other, leaders in the treatment-free world, the Michael Bushes and Dee, and do they consider feeding treatment like you were talking about? Because that was a new thing, like that's important.
Some do, some don't. Dee Lesby was pretty much against feeding sugar, I think. Michael Bush is fed granulated sugar, at least. I'm not stuck on it because it's not, most of my hives don't get any maintenance in a sense.
If they're not taking all their honey, then, there should be enough for them.
And it depends
Take all the
on,
honey and then feed them sugar water.
yeah.
It's kinda like-
And it totally depends on where I am. Like right now, I'm trying to get to a certain population, so with feeding, I'm not going to treat anything. But with feeding, I may be coddling a hive here or there that, like this last year is a good example because we had a really late, wet spring. And so by the time I got my nukes and queens and stuff done, there was no more nectar flow the rest of the year. And so the nukes had to survive through the whole summer with nothing to eat. And the ones that did that, then they got fed now in winter where they have nothing left, nothing stored. And so now, so they've had that time when they've had really harsh conditions and they've survived through it. And at this point, I want to keep my numbers up so I can do more splitting next year. But next year, when, if I get up to 30 or something, there won't be any feeding at all, and everybody's just going to have to deal with it. And you can do that if you've got the number of hives that you're looking for. Everybody can't do that, so I don't want to say you can't feed if you want to be treatment-free. Ultimately, the goal is bees that don't need fed. But I'm not a certification body. I'm not trying to tell people what they can and can't do. I'm trying to tell people what the goal is and why we want that to be the goal.
It's a good goal.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, over your journey, your treatment-free journey, do you have numbers where you could give yourself a success percentage? Like over these 15 years, would you say you've kept 10% of your hives alive because you're allowing the 90% to fail because they're just not adapting? I'm asking that, like, from a new beekeeper standpoint. Like, this guy doesn't even have bees yet. If he wanted to adopt this line of thinking, what should he expect to be able to keep? If he's going to start out with like the recommended 2 hives, should he expect to lose one every year or possibly both every year and keep getting bees until they stay alive for him? He got like the right type of bee. You know what I mean? Because you're a proponent of expand as much as you can, so you get the most amount of bees as you can. That way, you're going to have losses. So I'm just curious, like, do you have a figure for yourself, like over my beekeeping career with my, treatment free? I'm a 40% successful. Well, not successful, but I've kept 40% of my bees alive consistently, or over my beekeeping career.
I'm not sure exactly how to answer that.
Just like rounded, I've lost more than I've had. I lose most of them just because they fail.
At one point, I was keeping numbers about how many I had lost versus how many I didn't lose, and I forget what I'd gotten up to. It's on my blog somewhere.
You've spoken to that on a podcast too. It was pretty in the 80s.
Yeah, it was. I mean, had lost a lot of hives. Well, like I said, I started with 20 packages. I know that I lost 15 of those, and before I moved to Arkansas. And then when I moved to Arkansas, at that point, it's like which one was which. And then, my worst ever loss in a single year was Christmas of 2009. I lost 5 out of 7. But now I typically lose 5 to 20%. And I think that's more than acceptable. My rate for what is acceptable, it's been kind of interesting as time has gone on and the rate of losses has climbed at certain times. At those same times, what people consider acceptable also climbs. So it's a bit of confirmation bias there.
So you're just looking at more on a yearly basis rather than like a decade basis.
I would
You have to compare, I guess, year to year, not so much over a 10-year period.
Yeah, I would consider what's acceptable to lose would be about the same as what the feral population lost. We don't know what that is all the time, but certain years are going to be worse than others. Certain years you're going to have really bad, nectar flows, long dearth, bees starve. In Arkansas we had a really long, hot summer with no fall flow, and the next year there was not many swarms around because a lot of the feral hives died. So I've really kind of moved away from seeing success in the sense of losing hives and saving hives, and more toward are we getting in the direction of the goal? Am I enjoying what I'm doing? Am I learning new stuff? Am I contributing to the success of the species overall? Because I don't know if I'd lost 80 dogs, if I was a shepherd and I'd lost 80 sheep, like that'd be a problem. But with bees it's different because I can make more and I can catch more and there's plenty around, and a lot of those ones that I had lost was ones that were combined in with other hives, so I didn't really lose anything other than a queen. So I want to be honest. I'm not trying to whitewash anything, but
I find your answer very encouraging, because I expect in the beginning it's going to be tougher as I move from packages and bought nukes to working with Bruce or others to get more local product, more local bees in, and so it's going to ebb and flow in some years, but as a whole, the losses would decline as I move from, I've been organic, or whatever you want to call it, soft treatment before, as I move towards treatment free. So, you know, I still know I'm leaving bought stuff and moving towards all local bees, and there's going to be more losses at that point and less over time, but then some years will still fluctuate. So, I mean, what you're saying is very encouraging to me, not a negative whatsoever. It's realistic, but encouraging.
And I showed you the loss rates on that graph earlier, and I think those numbers are severely handicapped by the fact that a lot of losses are coming from new beekeepers starting with packages, and they're treatment free and everything just dies on them. And I don't want that to happen. That's why I'm trying to tell people to not buy packages, because it's just not probably going to work very well for you. But again, even looking at it from that perspective, we're still looking at loss rate as measure of success, and that's not the case.
It's a pretty crude measure.
Yeah.
It is, in the sense, I have people all the time say to me, geez, I read how bad the loss rates are, and I said, that's half the story. They haven't told you how successful we've also become at creating new hives, splitting hives, creating new populations, that the net numbers on any given year are just really a couple percentage points difference, not the 40% loss rate people typically read in the paper. So,
That's sensationalism.
Yeah, and a commercial beekeeper will take let's just say 40% loss rate, and they'll go make a bunch of splits, and they'll come back to California the next year with the same number of hives.
yeah.
So the bees haven't gone anywhere. They've just changed hands, I guess. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah, the thing
Yeah.
is that
They cycle
dog,
generations.
you know, you can split your dog, but you can't put him back together again.
Yeah.
You know, making one dog, and that is the greatness of beekeeping. Like you said, you know, for anyone who wants to maintain 5 hives, you go into expensive winter, I'm going to go in with 7 or 8, and I'll have 5, and you do that, and you know, I think anyone who, whether you treat or non-treat, it's just the world we live in today, you know, because everyone's losing hives, no matter what side of the fence you're on, or even rotting the fence.
And it should be expected.
It is, and everyone says, well, you know, well, I don't want to expect a loss. You know, I mean, that's not encouraging to a new beekeeper to say, hey, if you get 2 hives, you're probably going to lose one of them. They're going to like, I am, you know, and that's not encouraging. And it's hard to say, hey, buy the 3rd one, and you might have 2, but you could lose all 3. You know, and they're looking at, I'm already dishing out for a smoker, I'm dishing out for the hive equipment, and maybe a veil and a hive tool, and now I got to buy bees. And for them, yeah, it's a huge investment coming out the gate. They're convincing their spouse that this is the right thing to do, and then, you know, then they're starting all over. And but I think that's the true story we need to tell to anyone. This is the way it is, and the better we can teach the biology of the bee, and how you can make the splits successful, so you have that little bit of leftover. You know, I don't know how many people run your bank account to 2 cents. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Usually people keep a little nest egg back for those rainy days where, you know, the unexpected happens. If we kept our bees that same way, we'd always, for the most part, you would hope, be able to say, hey, I had 5, I still have 5, and hopefully next year I'll still have those 5. And yeah, we fluctuate. Maybe I get down to 4 and up to 6, but in the end, the net goal is, like say, to have my 5.
Mm-hmm. And you can see that in the total number of kept hives in the country every year. I mean, if we lose 40%, you don't have 40% fewer hives the next year. The change is only a few percent in either direction, depending on who's running hives or what commercial beekeeper went bankrupt, or how. There's so many different things that contribute to that. The overall loss rate, yeah, we may have lost 1.5 million hives this last year, but that was all made up again for the most part. So it's like, oh well, it's just a number at that point.
I don't know what the exact number is, but Karen Rockachella for the State Bee Bears, I heard last year say in Philadelphia, she said that the influx of new beekeepers was almost a third of what there were the year before. So if there was, say, 50,000 before, just in 1 year, the influx was like 25,000 brand new beekeepers, just in the state of Pennsylvania, because of all this. Everybody wants to help the bees. This is the way I do it. And she said, it's not a matter of we're just losing bees, we're gaining a whole lot of brand new beekeepers.
And the more there is in the sensationalism about the losing the bees, the more new beekeepers we get. And I'm trying to do my best to tell people that if you're not keeping bees treatment free, you can't help the bees, because you're contributing to the problem rather than contributing to the solution. The problem is the treatment. If we hadn't had the treatment to begin with, we wouldn't be having the problem we're having now. It's and that very idea is so counterintuitive to people that the medicine is actually causing the problem rather than fixing it.
Solomon, was it your information or Michael Bush that talks about South Africa with that, where they made the decision as a country not to treat? Is that true? I mean, somewhere I read that South Africa made a decision not to treat within like 5 to 7 years.
I read that too.
The population had naturalized between the Africanized bees and the mites.
That wasn't specifically me, but I have read that too. It is out there.
Do we know what that did to their agricultural yield?
I was just about to ask that.
Because I think I've heard that as an argument before too, like why we need to treat, but what about, what about the agricultural?
That's what I was going to ask. Something very interesting I'm taking away from this whole presentation is you making the distinction that we are not commercial beekeepers, so we shouldn't think that way. And that's like a whole different way to look at things, especially from, a lot of mentors are small scale commercial operations, and if they don't keep their bees alive, they lose money or they lose their livelihood. But if you say, if we never had treatments in this country, if the commercial beekeepers never came up with these treatment regimens and stuff like that, wouldn't that have been devastating to our food supply? I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes, that is a good, I'm not saying yes, but yes, that is a good question. That's one of the fun ones that I like to play around with. So, okay. So you've probably seen the meme about, they show a picture of a produce section in a grocery store, and then they show a picture of like all the produce gone, or at least the ones that are pollinated by bees. First of all, if you compare the two pictures, there's still a lot of stuff that we can eat that's not pollinated by bees. So you hear the quote from Einstein, which isn't actually from Einstein, about if we eliminated bees, then the entire human race would be gone in like 4 years or something. We have a lot of food that's not pollinated by bees, first of all. Beef isn't pollinated by bees. Grass, yeah. Grass is, beef is just grass reconstituted.
Pawpaws.
What's that?
Pawpaws.
Pawpaws?
Indigenous fruit to this state, predating the colonists.
I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is.
Flies still to this
Okay,
day.
yeah.
There's no honeybees in pawpaw trees.
I have plenty of bumblebees where I live. They pollinate, like my dad has apple trees and some peaches and plums, and grapes don't need pollinated. But, I would have fruit because of my dad's place and all the fruit trees that he planted, and the bumblebees and the alkali bees and butterflies that pollinate all of that. What we would lose is we would lose a great proportion of the almonds, because almonds are factory farmed using migratory bees. We would lose, and a lot of fruits related to that, like nectarines and peaches and cashews also. Yeah, so what we would lose is a lot of cheap access to those sorts of foods. We would not lose, probably also, okay, so yeah, that's my overall point.
That's the key phrase. We would lose cheap access to those foods.
Right.
We wouldn't lose it completely, but the prices would change.
If every bee died instantly, every honeybee, European honeybee, which is not native to the United States anyway, depending on who you ask, a lot of people would still have fruit that grew it in their backyard because of the native pollinators. and the non-native pollinators that just don't happen to be honeybees. Excuse me. But a lot of we wouldn't lose corn, and that's a third of the American diet. Soybeans don't need pollinated usually, I think. Wheat, yeah, grains don't need pollinated. But the point is that we would lose cheap access to these things, not that we would starve to death. A lot of our American agricultural system is based on subsidies that support cheap food. We're really, even though corn is a huge amount of our diet, we're really paying for it even though we don't realize it. You know, if there's a documentary called King Corn where they kind of pointed out that stuff, and you know, we're all paying $22 an acre or whatever it is for excess production of corn. That would, you know, that would be impacted. That's what's going to happen if we lose bees, which we're not going to lose bees because bees are fine. But don't tell anybody that because we need the publicity.
So basically, an industry is dependent on treating bees. So like several industries are dependent, just like there's recent studies that, you know, drinking milk into adulthood and beyond isn't necessarily a healthy thing, but you know, the Dairy Association wants you to believe you need to have milk every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those industry stats, sort of like, you know, paralleling, you know, we have to treat bees or else we wouldn't have modern agriculture.
The same as the idea that you need to eat meat to get protein. There are 7 million vegans in this country, and none of them have died of lack of protein. These things, there's a lot of things like that that we believe that aren't necessarily true. And I mean, there's so many examples. I wish, doesn't matter. Do you have anything, Bruce? You just...
I think native pollinators would flourish in the absence of honeybees because honeybees are pigs, to be honest.
Yeah.
They take everything. You can't go back and really think of what would have happened had they not had treatments because they didn't have treatments for a good long time. Even after mites were like discovered, they didn't have it.
And if you look at how honeybees are managed, like they're managed to suck every ounce of nectar out of the area that they're in. Like, you know, you ask me how many bees can you put in an area? It's like, well, if they run out of honey, then that's too many. You know, we're actually managing bees in a lot of places where we're sucking all of the nectar out of the environment, and that is negatively affecting native pollinators. The only thing they can get into, like the reason why the bumblebees in my area aren't that negatively affected is because bumblebees have much longer tongues, and so they can reach flowers that the honeybees can't get to. That, you know, the honeybees may adapt longer tongues, I don't know. But there was one thing I was going to say. Yeah, go ahead.
So, you know, if we're all real, the world we live in, you know, we're all super impatient. You know, the microwave isn't fast enough. Our internet speed is not near fast enough. And to tell me that I can't have an apple when I want one, or a cantaloupe, or a watermelon,
oh yeah,
get out of here. That, you know, and I mean, in the world we live in, it's the almighty dollar rules. And you know, that the reason they want all these bees and pay an outrageous price to truck them to California is because it's the almighty dollar. And they know that there's no food, they gotta feed the bees, there's nothing to bees to eat while they're pollinating, but they're willing to take that risk and put their bees at risk. And I just watched the documentary, I think it was yesterday, and they said, and to this day, they're still clearing more acreage and planting more trees because, why? People keep buying almonds at a record rate.
Not only that, but they've produced more markets for almonds. Where did almond milk come from?
Oh,
You ever milked an almond?
Yeah, right. so you know, but it is, you know, we're in Adams County, and I don't know if you know, you're from Oregon, that wouldn't mean nothing to you, but you don't drive very far in Adams County that you don't see orchards. And I'm talking huge orchards. Every hill, it looks like the almond valleys of California, where every hill, where you look, there's nothing but orchard trees. It's cherries and it's some peaches and apples.
It's like
and they'll tell you and they all, every one of them, hire pollinators to come in because they'll say, because if I don't, my yield will drop.
Yep.
They know that. I need more pollinators, and and I watched another documentary where the same thing, blueberries. They know exactly how many hives they need for every acre of blueberries to do, and I watched where they grid it off a 1 foot section, and they literally stop with a stopwatch and count how many bees visit blossoms to know how many bees they need to make their yield, to make their market to their customer. And you're not going to tell them about, well, the bees are going to go away, and your yield's going to drop, and that's okay. It's just not going to happen.
And
What you're saying makes this ridiculously complicated.
It is.
What you have up there,
Yeah.
the commercial bees.
Yeah.
What about speaking of New Jersey, the density of beekeepers in New
Oh,
Jersey?
it's going to drop.
If we all stopped treating,
Yeah.
it would implode. We
Yeah.
would have to do a complete reset, and nobody's willing to do that.
we would, if we all had to stop treating.
Where you want to have a massive reset.
Oh, massive reset. It's like a forest fire creating its own wind. You guys probably don't have forest fires out here, but we certainly do. You can get to a point in a forest fire where it creates its own wind, and that wind drives the fire, which it's a vicious cycle where you get more wind and it turns itself into a blast furnace. And in this case, that forest fire is the almonds, because there's such a big market for almonds. They're all grown in California. They all need bees, and they will pay so much to get bees into California for almonds that it drives the entire industry to be a certain way. So as far as a peaceful transition of power, it's just not going to happen.
Or some severe legislation.
I think you.
Well, even then,
No,
legislation is driven by money also.
I'm just poking fun at the
Yeah,
problem.
yeah, that's a good point.
So if we consider that bees are part of a system of production, you can look at that a variety of ways. We can look to other systems of production maybe as providing examples. And one thing I'll draw on is in animal production systems, we made just incredible genetic progress in terms of efficiency and utilization of resources. But we have very specific metrics we look at as well to monitor that progress and select based on those metrics. So I think the challenge for the beekeeping production system is to develop the metrics that we need to monitor and guide, selection in the direction we want to go. And I don't think we've even scratched the surface. I mean, we're looking at whether it lives or it dies as our metric, and we need to get much more sophisticated than that to make the progress that we need to.
Hang on a second. We're out of time, so I don't want to hold up the cleanup process. We can start that. I'll hang around here for as long as y'all want to, so we can still keep talking, but everybody, we need to start cleaning up the things so we can get out of here by 7. So thanks for having me. It's been great being here. I really enjoyed it. Be happy to come back as much as you want. Yeah.
I keep native bees as well as honeybees. So I have mason bees in the spring, I have leafcutter bees in the summer. I set up their houses, I harvest their cocoons, put them in the refrigerator, put them out in the spring. So I have a good idea of how native bees are managed, and now I'm learning honeybees. I honestly think the almond problem can be solved by native bees, get rid of the honeybees, because they need pollination for a few weeks once a year. You create enough native bees, you put them out for those few weeks, they take the nectar and stuff, they make the cocoons, and then you just put them away until the next year and you bring them back out again. So you don't have to manage them for the whole year, you don't have any of the problems that we have trying to manage huge colonies of honeybees. So not all problems need to be solved by the same bee.
Can you make that work with the mason bees?
Absolutely.
February in
Huh?
in February in
In California?
California?
May I have